I'm just delighted to introduce our speaker this morning, the Reverend Ann Tyndall. Ann is retired from the UU ministry and from healthcare chaplaincy. And she currently sits on the community ministry team with me, where we provide support and guidance for Reverend Greg Jones, who, as you know, is our fellowship's community minister. She's a practicing Buddhist and has previously led some weekly Buddhist meditations here, and has also spoken here several times, all of which I've enjoyed immensely. So please welcome Ann.
I'm on. Where's the camera that people online are?
Right there.
Okay.
To the left of the door.
Oh, okay. Oh, hi. So I'm just delighted to be here with all of you this morning and all of you who are dialing in remotely. It's really cool. And I just want to say that Amanda's liturgy and what you've already shared in your joys and concerns really has communicated what I'm hoping we take away today. So if you've already got it, you're excused and you can go to the kitchen and get coffee and twiddle your thumbs until the rest of us come out. But anyway, maybe I can add a couple more things to what she says. So I'm going to begin this way. I want to invite you to imagine something. So imagine that you're at home and you're awaiting the arrival of a close loved one, could be a friend, could be a member of your family, this person you haven't seen in a long time. So you're really anticipating it. You've prepared, you've cleaned the house, you've put up some snacks and refreshment, and right now they're due in a little bit, and you're just sitting sort of relaxing with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, just letting the anticipation build. Different kinds of things run through your mind, have images of how they looked the last time you saw them, or suddenly you remember a guffaw of laughter that happened one night while playing charades, or you remember the big hug that they would always give, and that would inspire you, even though you're a little bit shy, to reach out and hug back in the same way. So if you've got that sort of story in your mind, I want to invite you to reflect on it in this way. So I want to know what your experience of this is. What are you experiencing right now? So as you're anticipating the arrival of somebody you're really looking forward to, do you notice any physical sensations, anything that's going on in your body that's communicating this anticipation? And do you notice certain feelings? What feelings are sort of washing through you as you anticipate this visit? And now, what's your mind like? And here, I'm not so much interested in the thoughts you're having, but in kind of the quality of your mind. Like, is it just bubbling like a popcorn maker without a lid, or are you really relaxed and chilled and just very grounded, or anything in between? What's your mind? What's the energy like? And maybe so if you've had a chance to tune in to any of those dimensions of the experience you might have been having, I have done this, I've invited this because I'm going to be talking about welcoming, and I wanted to start with the basis of a lived experience, what it's like for you to anticipate welcoming, throwing open your heart and mind to somebody you really care about and haven't seen. So I hope that's a touchstone for you as I go through the other things that I have to say. So, to begin with, I think that there are, in our human being, we seem to have three fundamental orientations. One of those, and that's orientation both inwardly to ourselves and outwardly to others. So one is opening our hearts, opening our mind, opening our energy, anything like that. The next one is closing, which could be kind of shutting down or protecting ourselves or getting aggressive to push away something that seems dangerous. And then the third one is being unaware, like there's always this barrage of stuff coming at us, and our perceptions are sort of geared that we're going to select the things that to be aware of that we're paying attention to. So there's all this other stuff going on that we don't know. And so there's just unawareness. So we open, we close, or we remain unaware. So, you open your eyes, your ears, your other senses, and you take in and you engage out of that stance. You open your heart and your mind and your arms to a treasured other person. You might find yourself opening to a new experience. And opening, for me at least, includes the sense of radiating some warmth. There's a general caring warmth that just heads out, and sometimes you don't know how far it's going to go. It also, this opening also sparks curiosity. So we're not clouded with a lot of assumptions or anything, but we're just curious to see about what happens next. And I consider welcoming an act of opening. But we also close, and a common reason that we close is to protect ourselves. And this is, I'm not judging this stuff because we had these capacities in the oldest part of our brain long before somebody stood in a pulpit and talked to you about it. So these are, they're grounded in survival. So, but not always necessary. So we close out of a variety of senses of fear. You can fear for your physical safety. Sometimes we harden our hearts to protect our vulnerability. If we're angry, we might close our minds, or we close our eyes, or turn away, or stop engaging. All of those are closing kinds of activities. And then, as I already said, there's this cacophony of stuff happening all around us that goes unnoticed because none of it has snagged our attention. Like every now and again I see cars going by, but I'm not really paying attention to them, so they're not part of my awareness. So, obviously, we meander through our lives, opening and closing, and not aware of all of the things that are available to our attention. And sometimes we're open to our current situation, and then other times we're closed. But functioning requires adapting moment by moment to our current situation, opening or closing or ignoring the extraneous stuff available to us. And our well-being seems to be enhanced by a nimbleness in our ability to open or close or ignore, but in particular to open. I think the closing is wired to a deeper, older, nonverbal part of our brain, so it's almost like it's like the autonomic nervous system. You don't have to, coach yourself to breathe. So there's this basic way that we have as human beings to orient ourselves toward everything, the whole of our lives. I'm going to tell you a story. My partner and I were both Unitarian Universalist ministers when the Gray hymnal, the one we sing out of now, when that was being created. Our friend from seminary, Mark Bellatini, was chair of the hymnal commission. And every now and again, he or some other member of the commission would show up at GA or to a ministers' meeting, and they'd have a little stack of proposed new hymns for us to sing. And it was always fun and occasionally cringeworthy to see what was possible. But it was at one of those gatherings that I first encountered one that became my favorite hymn. And that's For All That Is Our Life. And we're going to sing it a little later. The first line goes, "For all that is our life, we come with thanks and praise, for all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build a common good and to make our own days glad." It became a favorite of the church that I was serving in New York at the time that the hymnal came out. And when we would sing it, there was just a sense that we were singing with one voice and that we were meaning the words. I then went on to another church where the pianist thought it sounded like I think it was the music for Hill Street Blues or something. So he just sort of rushed through it, and I was brokenhearted. But the first time I sang For All That Is Our Life, I was deeply touched by it. And what I think I was touched by was a recognition of something deep within me, and I'm shamelessly willing to project onto everyone else. It's just part of our humanity. And that is that we can show up for everything that is our life. We can show up, or we can open. The good stuff, the bad stuff, even the moments that we might ignore. But we have got that capacity within us to continually open and embrace all that is our lives. And that in fact, that act of opening to everything somehow nourishes us and provokes the kind of growth and transformation that you were referring to in the reading that you did, Amanda. So beyond showing up for all that is our life, we can find the good in all of it, and meaning and love, which all of these things, we would call positive experiences. And those positive experiences can be tapped into even in something horribly painful. I mean, I worked as a chaplain in the hospital, and so from time to time I would be at the bedside of a family member who had died, but they had died surrounded by so much love and were so much at peace that you would want to use the word good death, even though if you think about it, like, if you're dying, what's good about that? But there was that sense of that experience being included in the good of life. So it gives us the showing up is where we find meaning and love. Positive or negative. And another thing that arises, and we'll sing about, is a sense of gratitude. You can going back to the bedside, you can imagine the family brokenhearted and at the same time just flooded with gratitude for this person's life, for the peacefulness of their passing, for what lives on in them, for the love that this person invited out of their own hearts. Other times, when I was working as a chaplain, I would after I would leave a visit with a patient and family, having heard many stories about their lives, inevitably the lives were kind of a lovely mess of happiness, satisfaction, accomplishment, and times of loneliness and loss and mistakes, fights, things like that. There would be something about the patient and the family in the midst of that medical crisis that dissolved the layers of defensiveness for everyone in the room, and rendered everybody vulnerable, but not vulnerable in the way that you're going to get hit if you're the goalie and you don't have all your padding on, but vulnerable in the way that makes you hyper touched by life, just very, very open to it and touched deeply from it. I guess you would say that. So I would come away sensing that we were not only in touch with the fullness of life that arose through feeling fully vulnerable and open, but we were also touched by goodness. And I would walk away, I think if I'd been a Christian minister, I might have walked away and said something like, God is good. But I walked away with this profound sense of well-being, that in the midst of this, of a slice in time filled with the messiness of our lives, I was touching in, and I assume I was connecting with the good in these people in this situation. So I'm going to shift my focus to Buddha a little bit. I'm sure you know that the Buddha began as a young prince, well-to-do guy in northeastern India, and his name was Siddhartha Gautama. And at about the age of 29, he went on a spiritual quest. He snuck away in the dead of night. He threw off all of his finery and exchanged with his manservant, the one person who knew he was going, exchanged for his very ordinary clothes so that he could go off in disguise. And Siddhartha was concerned with suffering. He had discovered, much to his parents' chagrin, that life actually includes suffering. And he wanted to understand it. He wanted to understand what caused it, why it happened, and how to find relief from suffering. And this is what really propelled him into his spiritual quest. And after many years of many kinds of spiritual ascetic experiences, he did have an experience of awakening. Becoming enlightened is how we generally refer to it. And after that, he was named Buddha, which means the awakened one. So he did find his answers. And he began to teach. And the first thing he taught, and I'm guessing many of you have come across this, but he taught the Four Noble Truths, which are the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the path that leads to cessation. So the truth of suffering is what I'm thinking concerns us in particular here as we think about welcoming all that is our life. The Buddha's first great gift was to confirm that life includes suffering. It wasn't anybody's mistake. You're not being punished by God or the gods. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with you that you're suffering. It's just that this is a part of life. This is part of what is all that is our life. And that is a very freeing thing, because instead of being predisposed to be frightened of suffering or to try to protect ourselves against it because something's wrong with it, we can just, begin to accept it. Like, yeah, life includes suffering. So that was his beginning point for his journey and his teaching. And of course, he went on, the rest of the teaching tells how suffering arises and how you go about ceasing the suffering, which has, I'll talk about that later. Anyway, and then the path to follow to get there. Let's see. And as he went on to teach about suffering, he taught that the origin of our suffering lies in how we react to our experience moment by moment. How we react, or that we react with automatic reactivity, and it's that begins to cause our suffering. A very good example. Throughout the day, I pull out my phone and I open the weather app and I open it to confirm the fact that, yes, I am hot. And then it's going to be hot until, later today. And so I'm going to be uncomfortable. All of this is, needless making myself suffer about something that hasn't happened yet. I mean, I notice it's warm, but I'm not unhappy yet. So why am I doing this? But it's a very, cheesy, simple kind of thing that I do, and maybe some of you do too. So what the Buddha taught was how to work with our minds, how to catch ourselves in these habitual patterns of reacting to something hot, bad, how to change those habitual patterns, and that relieves the suffering. It doesn't stop us from feeling hot or cold or dying or losing people we love or being punched in the stomach on the playground by a bratty kid, but we have a choice in how we respond to something, and it's the responding that begins to give us freedom from suffering. And I think that from the Christian folks I dealt with a lot when I was working as a chaplain, somebody would want, their initial response to any kind of a health crisis would be to want it to stop, to want to get rid of whatever the thing was, and they wanted prayer for that to stop. Make the diagnosis a mistake. I want a miracle cure. All of these things, and it's exactly how we respond in the first moment. But what these Christian people, the way they would find peace within all of this was a kind of acceptance that there was a relationship with God in that, different for different kinds of faith, but that it led to the same thing, accepting and working with what is. And in a theistic framework, that would be God's grace would help with that. So many of you might be familiar with the Serenity Prayer. That's an integral part of the Alcoholics Anonymous path. And it was an adaptation of a prayer that was written by a mid-century Protestant theologian, Reinhold Niebuhr, and he prayed it at the end of a sermon he gave in 1941 or 42, something like that. And his original phrasing of the prayer went this way: God give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change what things can be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish between the two. The things that cannot be changed is the truth of suffering. It points to a reality that life here on the planet Earth involves experiences that we will perceive or experience negatively, harmfully, but we don't have any wiggle room in them. We have a choice to rage against it or to make peace with it in some kind of way. And the Serenity Prayer prays for being at peace with the things that we cannot change. The Buddha suggests that suffering arises not from the hard stuff, but from the way we react to it. And the religious approach within Buddhism then is to work on your responding, as I have already said. But either way, this is a way of shifting our focus once out of an Eastern context and once out of a Western one, all of which involves transforming how we relate to things inwardly rather than being able to control external circumstances. Of course, the stuff we can control, and the wisdom to figure out which is really crucial to living a life. But the point is that the world is not the problem, it's how we move through life. Well, I was raised a Unitarian Universalist by humanists. This were fierce mid-century, that would be last century. Although all of us in this room know that. But the people who became Unitarian Universalists after the war, not all of them, some of them were propelled by a fierce humanism of looking to human capacity and human responsibility to work with the ills of the world, to find meaning in life, to open ourselves to a deeper capacity to love. And so God was not in the picture. It was in some UU churches, but not in the one I grew up in. And so I have a deep affection for those people, and it's also why when I was feeling like I needed a more rigorous spiritual path, I turned to Buddhism because it's not a theistic religion. So I could find more spiritual rigor, more of a path, but it didn't involve God. So I hope that those now deceased humanists who fostered me in a young time can forgive me for that. So the Buddha's awakening involved discovering that the true nature of reality was within him and accessible to him. And this we call Buddha nature, or the awakened nature, and that it is our true nature. And the Buddhist path that I follow, change that. In the tradition that I follow, Shambhala Buddhism, basic goodness, or Buddha nature is called basic goodness. That is a goodness that transcends the dualities of good and bad, happy, sad, right, wrong, all of those things. So in essence, another way of saying it is that we are all basically good, and that the situations of our lives in their depth of reality are basically good. But the problem lies that this basic goodness is covered over by the detritus of living life. And the detritus is based of misconceptions and misinterpretations and unskillful kinds of reactions. And those sort of, throw a little bit of dirt or veil this essential basic goodness within us. So the Buddha offered paths, he offered myriad paths, myriad ways to work with hearts and minds so that we could uncover what is already there. And the path involves learning to open to everything without judgment, because the detritus ultimately fuels our path. Basic goodness expresses itself through seeing clearly the true nature of things. It manifests as compassion's ability to not only walk in another's shoes, but to want to alleviate their suffering. And following the path, our automatic reactivity, which is so often the source of our suffering, is transformed into wisdom and compassion. And there's a sense that the basic goodness in us is sort of growing out and reaching toward our outer lives just as we are bringing it into ourselves. So I want to return to the beginning and say, see if you can reconnect with that feeling that you had anticipating the arrival of your dear old friend or dear old relative. See if you can once again get in touch with the physical sensations and emotions that might have been washing through you, and sort of the quality of your mind, its energy level, whether it was going in all directions or in one. There's no right or wrong. It's just sort of paying attention to what's going on. So can you feel yourself opening in preparation to welcome? Do you have a sense of warmth? Do you have a sense of being inspired to radiate warmth out? And are you curious in a caring way about how they're doing, about how things are going for them? And is there something within you that you are longing to share within the gladness of this atmosphere? So the Buddha's path teaches you to trust that that experience of opening connects with wisdom and compassion. And over time, it might reorient everything in yourself. All of your habitual patterns might be reoriented to a propensity to remain open, to a propensity to that would be your first sort of impulse, would be to open to. And then as an added step, because we know this contributes to our awakening, it contributes to connecting with the world, it connects to making the world better. It's not just opening, but it's welcoming the raw material of whatever comes to us in our lives. Now, I see Ned heads nodding, and that makes me happy, but I'm thinking there might be some of you sitting there who are thinking of the ravages of Hurricane Helene, or the unspeakable death toll of the children, women, and men, all of the non-combatants in Israel, Gaza, West Bank, and now Lebanon. Or maybe your daughter and son-in-law just delivered a baby stillborn. Or maybe you're thinking about the politics of hate that's now targeting Haitian immigrants and putting their lives at risk. Or maybe you're sunk in a deep depression that feels beyond the reach of anything healing, opening, closing, any of it. And maybe the sum of all of this is that I'm coming across as kind of a Pollyanna simpleton. Maybe you hear my words as a simplistic denial of the brutality of life. La, 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 it's all good. You might be feeling like it profoundly disrespects all of the communities of people that I have just named, as well as those moments in our own lives when we are really up against something. And, as I was writing, what the hell, I was feeling like that too. But the Buddha taught a multitude of practices to train our minds to relax with what's going on as it is, without repressing it, without elaborating, or to stay present to the raw suffering without turning away from it or ignoring it or leaping into action, trying to fix it, because mostly that will stop you from hurting. It's difficult to remain open in any of these situations. But what I have increasingly experienced to be trustworthy is this: if we welcome the fullness of each moment, be it good or bad, we access basic goodnesses, wisdom, and compassion. We're not ignoring or repressing anything. We will then discover how to respond in ways that are helpful and healing and constructive. So the first moment is welcoming and opening the experience. And in the cases that I was just naming, the rawness, the raw pain of those experiences, trusting that if we do stay open in that moment, what's going to arise out of us next is wisdom and compassion that's going to guide us in how we can be of help. What would be the Buddha uses the word skillful. What would be the skillful thing to do? The thing that would actually help the situation rather than making it worse. So this is what I think about when I think about the act of welcoming. It is taking our propensity to open, or our capacity to open, and turning it into a propensity, welcoming those moments because we know that out of the simple, stark reality of one moment comes the creative response to the next, as well as just a sense of deep affection and warmth and caring for everything on the planet, all of us, muddling our way through lives. Now, there's some other practices that teach us to welcome, and I think about that because we're here in a UU congregation. They're the connections that we have with our friends and family. There's anticipating the stranger we will meet, and anticipating that this person will be decent and will have good intentions, rather being wary that they're going to, in some way, disappoint us and actually turn out to be a creep. So to just hang on to your goodwill, no matter what your little blabby mind is saying. And then participating in communities like this, in which we discover that we are more together than any one of us could be alone, that we have more capacity to radiate out the love that's at the center, to help bind up the wounds of our neighbors and the world around us, and to find surprising and creative ways to move forward in connection. And then there's one final practice that also can be a good thing, particularly energizing, and that is singing. So I've asked Amanda if we could switch the order of things, and before we have a conversation, I invite us all to sing hymn, 128, For All That Is Our Life.